Hello, I'm Dilek Tuna. You're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. European leaders say Greenland's future is non-negotiable following emergency talks in Brussels. The US, Ukraine and Russia are in Abu Dhabi for their first trilateral talks to end the war. And the United States unveils plans for a new post-war Gaza. European leaders completed emergency summit stressing that the bloc would stand firm against pressure. They insisted that Greenland's status and territorial integrity are not open to negotiation. Our correspondent William Denslow has more from Brussels.
At the conclusion of this emergency meeting of European leaders, Antonio Costa, the president of the European Council, said that Europe would not give in to any forms of coercion. This meeting was called after US President Donald Trump had threatened to impose duties from February on 8 European powers unless the United States was given control of Greenland, the semi-autonomous Danish territory. The message we heard from a number of European leaders is that Europe's unity, strength and resolve helped back down the US president and sent a strong message that that would essentially be a non-negotiable and that territorial integrity is absolutely vital going forward. There is also the other track that Europe has done more in recent days, including on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos, to persuade US President Donald Trump that more is being done to achieve Arctic security. Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, has ploughed to ramp up the defensive posture, collective security in the Arctic region. That's something we also know that Denmark is keen on, saying that Denmark is pursuing a permanent NATO presence on Greenland. There are, though, huge questions going forward. On the issue of Greenland, it's being reported that the US wants sovereign military bases there. Mette Frederiksen, though, the Danish Prime Minister, speaking here in Brussels on Thursday, said that that was a red line and that conversations about sovereignty of Greenland would not be up for discussion. So going forward, big questions about what this exactly means, whether NATO can do enough to persuade the Trump administration, whether the EU can do enough to persuade the Trump administration that they are taking collective security seriously without the need for the US to have a permanent sovereignty in Greenland. And of course, there are these rattling issues about what these tariff threats have meant for the transatlantic relationship. We know that the European Parliament will continue its discussions on the US-EU trade agreement next week. And essentially, the message from European powers is that it has been a bruising few days for this incredibly vital relationship, but they believe that unity is the key to progress ties going forward. William Denslow, Free News, Brussels.
Russia says it will hold security talks with the United States and Ukraine in Abu Dhabi today, after late-night discussions between President Vladimir Putin and US envoys in Moscow. The Kremlin says any lasting peace will depend on resolving territorial disputes, while Kyiv says that issue remains unresolved.
Russia says it will hold three-way security talks with the United States and Ukraine in Abu Dhabi on Friday, following late-night discussions in Moscow between President Vladimir Putin and US envoys. The meeting, which lasted around 4 hours, was described by the Kremlin as substantive and frank, but no breakthrough was announced. Thursday's talks involved senior Russian officials and US representatives, including Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff and his son-in-law Jared Kushner. They were joined by Josh Gruenbaum, newly appointed as a senior advisor to Trump's Board of Peace. A senior Kremlin aide said Russia's position remains unchanged, stressing that a lasting settlement would not be possible without agreement on territory. Moscow insists the issue must be settled under a formula discussed previously with Washington, while also saying it remains interested in a diplomatic solution. At the same time, Russia warned it would continue military operations until its goals are met. Meanwhile, in Davos, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said a document outlining US security guarantees for Ukraine was complete, but admitted that territorial questions remain unresolved.
We speak about one issue, which is the most difficult, which is not solved, and I think that trilateral meetings maybe will show each other variants. It's all about the eastern part of our country. It's all about the land. This is the issue which will not solved yet.
US President Donald Trump, on his way back from Davos, also weighed in, saying both leaders now appear ready to strike a deal.
You know, what's happened here is there were times when Putin didn't want to make a deal, times when Zelensky didn't want to make a deal, and it was like opposite times. Now I think they both want to make a deal, but we'll find out.
Meanwhile, fighting continued on the ground.
Ukrainian, Russian and US officials hold peace talks in Abu Dhabi, the first such meeting since the conflict began in 2022. The discussions are focused on security issues and territorial disputes, particularly over the Donbass region, which remain a major challenge. Russia continues to demand Ukrainian forces withdraw from occupied areas, while Ukraine has reportedly agreed on security guarantees with the US. The Russian delegation is led by Intelligence Chief Admiral Igor Kostyukov, and Ukraine's team is headed by negotiator Rustem Umarov. The White House, on the other hand, has not yet commented. As further talks are scheduled to end the war in Ukraine, attacks continue. One person was killed in the southeast of the country and 20 others were injured. In the Zaporizhzhia region, 4 strikes hit a local town, homes, schools and critical infrastructure were damaged. Russia says it targeted energy sites supporting Ukraine's military, while Ukraine reported striking a Russian oil facility and military targets in Crimea. Both sides say multiple drones and missiles were intercepted. The French Navy has intercepted a Russian tanker in the Mediterranean. The vessel is suspected to be part of the so-called Shadow Fleet, which enables Russia to export oil despite sanctions. French President Emmanuel Macron said the interception was carried out with Allied support and in full compliance with international maritime law. It happened in international waters in the Western Mediterranean between southern Spain and northern Morocco. Despite 19 European Union sanctions, Russia continues to export large volumes of oil, mainly to China and India. Spain's rail network is facing renewed scrutiny after a 4th accident in less than a week on Thursday. A commuter train collided with an arm of a crane in the southeast of the country, injuring a dozen people. It followed a high-speed train collision in the southern Andalusia region, which killed at least 43 people 4 days earlier.
In Brussels, European Union leaders held a minute of silence on Thursday in honour of victims from the train accidents in Spain as they met for talks on EU-US relations. The President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, expressed his condolences to the families and loved ones of those killed. The latest and 4th incident in less than a week was a commuter train that collided with a crane in southeastern Spain on Thursday. Officials said several people suffered minor injuries in the crash near the port city of Cartagena in Murcia region. It's after the first collision between 2 high-speed trains last Sunday near Ademuz in the south that killed at least 43 people. 2 days later, a commuter train derailed after a containment wall fell on the track due to heavy rain near the city of Barcelona. It killed the driver and seriously injured 4 passengers. On that day, the main train drivers' union called a nationwide strike over safety standards after that. Then there was a second less serious collision in the northeastern Catalonia region on the same day. Train drivers have announced strike action for the 9th, 10th and 11th of February, demanding stronger safety measures and improved infrastructure maintenance amid growing public concern over Spain's rail network.
The US has announced its plan to rebuild Gaza, including skyscrapers, new housing and major infrastructure after 2 years of war. But the United Nations warns that urgent humanitarian needs on the ground remain severe.
Skyscrapers in Gaza. That's President Donald Trump's plan for the Strip, with up to 180 high-rise towers in a sweeping reconstruction vision. The United States has outlined an ambitious blueprint to rebuild Gaza from the ground up, following 2 years of conflict.
It's going to be a great plan.
It was presented at the World Economic Forum in Davos by Trump and his newly created Board of Peace, which is tasked with ending the war between Israel and Hamas and overseeing reconstruction and development. Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, presented designs showing modern housing estates, industrial zones and tourism areas along the coast. It includes a new seaport and airport near the Egyptian border, as well as 2 major urban projects known as New Rafah and New Gaza. New Rafah would include more than 100,000 permanent homes, around 200 schools and 75 medical facilities.
Going forward, number one thing is going to be security. Obviously, we've been working very closely with the Israelis to figure out a way through de-escalation. And the next phase is working with Hamas on demilitarization, which I'll talk about in a second. But without security, nobody's going to make investments. Nobody's going to come, build there. We need investments in order to start giving jobs.
According to Kushner, funding is expected to come initially from governments, followed by private investors. Before that vision is realized, shorter-term goals for the first 100 days are more immediate. They include restoring basic services such as water, electricity and sewage systems, reopening hospitals and bakeries, and allowing more goods to enter the Strip.
Since Sunday, as of yesterday, our partners leading on emergency shelter assistance have reached over 13,000 households, distributing hundreds of tents and tarpaulins. Our partners distributing hundreds of tents. Our partners also continue to distribute mattresses, sleeping bags, blankets, warm clothes, cooking. It's not funny. Cooking utensils as well as solar lights. Our partners responsible for site management report that due to the capacity and funding constraints, they are currently able to provide support in just about 40% of the existing 970 displacement sites that exist across Gaza.
Displaced residents in Khan Yunis have expressed skepticism that the initiative would bring tangible change. Several said bombardment and insecurity persist despite announcements of ceasefire phases and reconstruction plans.
A country that had yet to accept US President Donald Trump's offer onto the Board of Peace has subsequently been withdrawn. Trump announced the move in a Truth Social post addressed to Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney. He reversed the invitation that Canadian officials said last week Ottawa had planned to accept. The decision comes after Mr. Carney's speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos, where he criticised powerful states for using tariffs and economic integration as political tools.
We stand firmly.
The required one-year notice period for the United States to leave the World Health Organization came to an end on Thursday. US President Donald Trump signed an executive order last year in January to withdraw the United States from the World Health Organization on his first day back in office. This triggered a one-year withdrawal process under the WHO's charter. But according to the organization, all membership dues need to be settled. Currently, the United States owes $260 million in unpaid dues for 2024 and 25. Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi has dissolved the lower house of Parliament. The move sets the stage for a snap election on the 8th of February.
Japanese voters will head to the polls on February 8th after Prime Minister Takaichi dissolved the lower house, seeking a stronger mandate amid high personal approval ratings. The vote will decide all 465 seats in the chamber and marks her first electoral test since becoming Japan's first female prime minister in October. Official campaigning begins on January 27th. If the ruling coalition of Takaichi's Liberal Democratic Party and the Japan Innovation Party wins a majority, she will be formally confirmed as Prime Minister in a special parliamentary session. Takaichi has pledged to ease pressure on households facing rising living costs, including suspending an 8% tax on food for 2 years. Inflation has shown signs of easing, with consumer prices rising 2.4% in December, supported by government subsidies for electricity and gas. The snap election comes at a sensitive time, as Parliament usually debates the national budget in February. Critics warn the move could delay approval of a record 122.3 trillion yen budget designed to support the economy and boost defense spending.
The restart of the world's largest nuclear power plant was suspended in Japan. It was stopped just a day after it went online for the first time in 14 years. Kashiwazaki Kariwa plant in Niigata province had been closed since the 2011 Fukushima disaster, but operations to relaunch it began on Wednesday after it received the final green light from the nuclear regulator. But after the suspension, the operator says it doesn't know when the problem will be solved. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll discuss the new US diplomatic moves involving Russia and Ukraine and what they may signal for the direction of the war. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. The United States says its envoy Steve Witkoff and President Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. The talks come after US President Donald Trump said he had a very good conversation with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on the sidelines of the Davos Forum. Now, in another development today, Ukrainian, US and Russian officials are having security talks in Abu Dhabi. Now, let's bring in our guest, Diogo Castro Silva, a political analyst from Sao Paulo, Brazil. Diogo, thanks for joining the program.
Thank you.
Now, let's start from the most recent development, as I just outlined. Why is this trilateral meeting happening at this moment, and what changed after the US envoy's talks with President Putin in Moscow?
Well, in the middle of an overnight discussion, many hours over Peshmerga and Kievan Rus, the historical lessons from President Putin, I think there is the try to push for some kind of trilateral discussions, which we are having in Abu Dhabi. I believe that might have been the push from the US side. Let's see what was promised, what was discussed by Mr. Kushner and Mr. Witkoff with Putin, because as we have witnessed in the past, the US has been trying to be very accommodating to Putin's desires. So it's kind of still unclear what was discussed. There was no transcripts or communicate to the press. So let's see what is going to happen in Abu Dhabi. It gives an avenue for a trilateral discussion, which is kind of needed because obviously you have the two parties. I don't know if they will be at the same time at the room, because in the past the trilateral discussions were intermediated by the US separately. So the US would meet separately with both delegations. Will we have a new format where the three parties will be in the room, and how impartial will be the US in those discussions is the second interrogation.
Okay, so you say these subsequent talks in Abu Dhabi were likely a request from the US side. Why would they hold these talks in Abu Dhabi rather than, say, Europe, Washington or Geneva? What does that choice of venue signal diplomatically, do you think?
Well, the Middle East has been has been the most of the times the venue chosen for this kind of talks. I believe Europe poses some issues about, for example, air flight clearances because of sanctions and so forth. So the Middle East has been the chosen avenue for this kind of talks several times in the past. Saudi Arabia, I believe Qatar as well, and now Abu Dhabi.
And does this risk reviving fears in Europe coming to this table as an equal negotiating party, or is it being drawn into a process shaped primarily by Washington and Moscow?
Well, both Washington and Moscow have been trying to sideline Europe in these discussions. The problem lies that many of the issues, there are three issues discussed that Europe will have to, at certain point, to be integrated in the discussions. The first issue is not in a particular order. It's the frozen money, which resides in European jurisdiction, mainly Belgium, is the financing of the Ukraine, because Europe is today almost the sole financier of Ukraine. So, I mean, it's the backer. So European architecture. So those three security architectures. So these three issues makes Europe unavoidable. But you are right. Both Moscow and Washington seem to be interested in sidelining Europe in these conversations.
And Diogo, what incentive does Russia have to join this trilateral format now, and what might be they hoping to extract from these talks?
Well, Russia has been playing these talks along because Putin is playing a game of not trying to be confrontational with Washington and the USA. So trying to make a semblance that he's interested in talks while continuing with maximalist demands. And this is the overriding Russia strategy. There is a second aspect that might start to impact, which is the failures on the battlefield, because despite all the Russia's boasts about piercing the front lines and being victorious, the fact is that Russia has barely moved for a year in terms of the front line and has less territory than in 2022. So the point is that second aspect, and then the impact on the morale and on the number of troops, so the amount of casualties, they might roll, but I still think it's the first aspect that is still governing Russia's strategy, like playing along and making a semblance that they want peace while continuing with maximalist demands.
Okay. And so do we know anything else, whether this is about concrete outcomes, prisoner exchanges, ceasefire lines, or simply reopening formal dialogue?
I believe there are two major sticking points still, and which are the fate of the unoccupied Donbas territory that Russia keeps claiming, and the Zaporizhia nuclear plant. Mm-hmm. These are still the two major sticking points. It's hard to see, especially on the question of territories, what room there is for compromise unless Russia changes its stance. What you as you well put, there might be other deals that are made, namely on prisoners and other issues more lateral, that might be agreed just because both parties want to show that they are performing in a way for Donald Trump, showing that it is the other and not themselves that are obstacles to peace.
And Diogo, how are European governments likely to view this as progress toward peace or as negotiations happening over their heads?
Well, I think the Europeans right now are truly realistic about US attitudes. So the amount of trust that there was previously between Europe and the US is badly shaken. And because Ukraine has interest in maintaining a strong alignment with Europe, they are realistic about, at the same time, about Washington intentions of sidelining them, and at the same time, they know that at a certain point Washington will need to speak with Europe on the issues I previously referred.
What signals from Moscow, Kyiv or Washington should we watch to judge what can be expected from these outcomes in the upcoming days or weeks?
I think the major issue that is preventing a peace is the acceptance of Moscow of a frozen conflict, or of the stopping of the conflict on the present front line. Until the moment that Russia signals the acceptance of this reality, I don't see anything really changing, because for both political considerations from Zelensky and from Ukraine, military considerations, because the unoccupied part of the Donbass is fundamental for Ukrainian defense, and because of the fragility of trust of US security guarantees, until the moment Russia accepts this reality, I don't see, and signals it might accept, I don't see anything really fundamentally moving in the talks.
And I mean, given years of failed negotiations, what would make any outcome from this meeting credible to Kyiv and to Moscow?
I mean, has always the power, because Moscow is the invading party, the cards are more on the side of Moscow in the sense of accepting, like I said, the front line at least froze conflict, meaning the conflict stops at the front line, which is basically whatever happens in ceasefires and in almost any conflict, you stop the conflict at the front line. Anything else makes it very hard for, like I said, for Ukraine to accept any other outcome. And also because the trust on US security guarantees have become more and more fragile given the attitudes of the US regarding its other allies. So these attitudes have consequences across the board, not only in the case like Denmark and Greenland, but they have consequences elsewhere on the credibility of US commitments. So outside of these variables, it's very hard to see what can come out. The other aspect is the political situation of both Putin and Zelensky. It's very hard to Zelensky. The greatest threat of Zelensky is not from a more peaceful candidate, more accommodating to Russia candidate, let's say, or faction in Ukrainian politics. On the contrary, it's from someone more bellicose. Likewise, the greatest threat to Putin, in a way, is not from his an appeasement candidate, but from a more ultra-right, the mill bloggers, ecosphere, and so forth. So both of them are to be bellicose in a way. So this also makes a settling of the conflict harder.
Okay, Diogo, my last question to you. What are the non-negotiables for each side going into this room, into these talks?
Well, for Ukraine, clearly the non-negotiable, the red line is the front line and the question of the unoccupied territories in the Donbass. That is the ultimate red line. It's really the big issue. Likewise, in the question of President Putin, he feels the pressure to Sow's victory. So, and this is my personal opinion, he still believes he can vassalize Ukraine and make an agreement that really pollutes Ukrainian politics and makes Ukrainian political situation in the future much harder to manage. So for the same reason, the question of the territories in the Donbass is really what Putin is after. So these are the non-negotiables, and as you can infer from my response, I'm not particularly optimistic on an outcome of these negotiations for this reason.
Diogo, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
Now we'll take a break, and when we return, we'll take a look at major stories from the region. Welcome back to A News. Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. President Donald Trump says he hopes to avoid new US military action against Iran. The comment comes as Washington sends a major military force to the Middle East. He says a big force is moving toward Iran and that he's watching the country very closely. Two US officials say an aircraft carrier strike group and other assets will arrive in the region in the coming days.
You know, we have a lot of ships going that direction just in case. We have a big flotilla going in that direction, and we'll see what happens. We have a big force going toward Iran. I'd rather not see anything happen, but we're watching them very closely. I stopped 837 hangings on Thursday. If they would have been dead, every one of them would have been hung. This is like from 1,000 years ago. This is an
The United Nations says it has taken over management of detention sites in northeastern Syria after Kurdish-led forces guarding them withdrew following clashes with Syrian government troops. The facilities hold tens of thousands of women and children linked to Islamic State, raising concern over security and humanitarian access. The SDF pullback has affected major sites, including Al-Hol, where Syrian government forces have now established a security perimeter and UN teams have begun assessments. However, they say the access remains restricted.
Our colleagues tell us that the situation in the camp remains rather tense and volatile, with reports of looting and burning. As a result, it was not possible for them to enter the camp itself. And this was the same situation today when they tried again.
Today, Istanbul hosted the second meeting of the Balkan Peace Platform, bringing together senior diplomats from across the Balkan region. Chaired by Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan, the talks focused on regional security, energy cooperation and migration challenges. Through this initiative, Turkey aims to reinforce dialogue and stability in the Western Balkans.
Istanbul on Friday hosted the second meeting of the Balkan Peace Platform, drawing top diplomats from across the Balkan region. At Friday's meeting, which was chaired by Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan, participants discussed a range of issues including joint border management, energy security, regional transport corridors, and means of combating undocumented cross-border migration. According to the Turkish Foreign Ministry, Fidan held separate bilateral meetings with his Balkan counterparts on the sidelines of the event. Details of the bilateral meetings were not immediately available, but diplomatic sources said they focus mainly on enhancing bilateral ties within multilateral frameworks. The foreign minister of Greece, whose relations with Turkey have long been strained due to disagreements over Cyprus, did not take part in Friday's Istanbul meeting. Nevertheless, Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis is slated to visit Ankara next month for high-level talks with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Earlier this week, the Turkish and Greek deputy foreign ministers met in Athens, where they discussed ways of enhancing relations between the two countries. Turkey has long sought to position itself as a stabilizing force in the Balkans, a region historically known for its complex political and ethnic landscape. The first meeting of the Balkan Peace Platform was held in Istanbul last July, with the aim of fostering dialogue, building trust, and encouraging cooperation among Balkan states. This is Adam Maro for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Baku is hosting the photography exhibition The Rising Light by world-renowned photographer and photojournalist Reza Degati. Running for nearly 2 months, the exhibition is on display at Heydar Aliyev International Airport, presenting Azerbaijan's culture, people and heritage.
The Rising Light, a photography exhibition by world-renowned photojournalist Reza Degati, known as Reza, welcomes international travellers with a visual story of Azerbaijan. The exhibition presents the country's rich heritage, people and modern life. The project is supported by Azerbaijan Airlines, Heydar Aliyev International Airport and Boeing, and is displayed in Terminal 1's International Zone in Baku. Choosing Heydar Aliyev International Airport as the exhibition venue is deeply symbolic.
I have been traveling for 45 years all over the world and spending a lot of time in the airport. So one of my dreams was always why there is no culture center, why there is no exhibition place in the airport. And finally, thanks to Azerbaijan Airlines and Boeing and this Heydar Aliyev International Airport, all of them, they get together and my dream became a reality.
Reza is a world-renowned photographer and photojournalist known for his powerful human stories. Over a career spanning more than 40 years, he has worked in over 100 countries. In Azerbaijan, Reza has documented key moments of the nation's recent history, including refugee experiences and the First and Second Karabakh Wars. The Rising Light exhibition includes a dedicated section focusing on UNESCO World Heritage Sites of Azerbaijan. Through 44 photographic works, visitors can see the walled city of Baku and the Shirvanshah's palace, the Gobustan rock art cultural landscape and the Sheki Khan's palace.
President Shavkat Mirziyoyev has taken part in high-level international events in Davos, signing the Charter of the Peace Council and holding a series of key meetings with global leaders and major financial institutions.
President Shavkat Mirziyoyev took part in key diplomatic economic engagements in Davos, highlighting Uzbekistan's growing role in international peace efforts and global cooperation. He signed the Charter of Peace Council at a ceremony chaired by US President Donald Trump, attended by leaders from more than 20 countries, including Azerbaijan, Hungary, Turkey, Saudi Arabia and Kazakhstan. By joining the initiative as a founding member, Uzbekistan committed to supporting conflict prevention and the economic and social recovery of Gaza in line with the UN Security Council-backed peace framework. On the sidelines of the ceremony, President Mirziyoyev held a trilateral meeting with Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev and Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. The leaders discussed expanding mutually beneficial cooperation and strengthening multilateral engagement, including within the Organization of Turkic States. The president also met with senior members of BlackRock, where the slides reviewed prospects for the company's participation in priority investment projects in Uzbekistan, including entering the capital of local enterprises and launching joint investment mechanisms. In addition, talks were held with European Bank for Reconstruction and Development President Odile Renaud-Bassou, with EBRD investments in Uzbekistan nearing $7 billion. Discussions focused on green economy, infrastructure, private sector development and digital transformation. Iris Sivil Rajab reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan A News.
US Special Envoy for South and Central Asia, Sergio Gore, has arrived in Turkmenistan for a series of high-level meetings. Our correspondent, Fariza Kalimurzina, has more from Almaty, Kazakhstan.
Turkmenistan is hosting a visit by US Special Envoy for South and Central Asia, Sergio Gore. The program includes a series of high-level meetings with representatives of the Turkmen government and the business community. The talks focus on expanding bilateral cooperation, strengthening regional stability and developing economic partnerships. Washington emphasizes its interest in new areas of engagement that, according to the US side, would be mutually beneficial and contribute to security and prosperity across the region. The visit comes amid growing US interest in Central Asia and increased diplomatic engagement with the region. For Turkmenistan, dialogue with the United States carries particular significance. While maintaining to its long-standing policy of neutrality, the country is also seeking new partnerships to strengthen its international position. In this context, energy and logistics are seen as key areas shaping the dialogue. Turkmenistan holds the world's fourth largest resource of natural gas, making it an important player in ensuring regional energy stability. At the same time, the agenda extends beyond economic issues. Experts point to Turkmenistan's long border with Afghanistan as a critical factor in regional security, as well as the importance of developing infrastructure and trade projects in border areas. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
We'll take a short break now, and when we return, we'll look at the latest developments in Iran's protest crackdown, reported casualties and regional responses. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. New estimates suggest the human cost of Iran's government crackdown on nationwide protests could be far higher than previously acknowledged, with the United Nations Special Rapporteur saying the death toll may exceed 20,000 civilians. Meanwhile, Recep Tayyip Erdogan told his Iranian counterpart that Turkey opposes any foreign intervention in Iran and favours regional stability, highlighting unease both within and beyond Iran's borders. Now let's bring in our guest, Dr. Nurhan Albaya. She's a professor at Istanbul Aydın University, Istanbul, Turkey. Professor Dr. Nurhan, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much.
Now, recent assessments indicate Iran's protest death toll may exceed 20,000 civilians. What do these figures tell us about the scale of the crackdown there, and how reliable are they given limited access inside the country?
Actually, this is a bottom line on reliability, because if we took both sides' numbers, which the real number stated by the Iranian government, around 3,500, and the number that just has been announced in the newest or recent UN report, 20,000, we will find a huge gap between them. This is basically because of the information blackout and communications constraints done by the Iranian government. We shouldn't forget that Iran imposed a very, very exclusive communication cut and internet shutdown and telecommunication shutdown as well. So this was behind that big number or big gap between the real number or the official number, let's call it, which is announced by the Iranian government, and the one announced by the latest UN report. Human rights groups, they are relying in their jobs in Iran, especially because Iran, the information flow is not same as other countries due to the constraints. So in Iran, those human rights groups, they are relying on some volunteers, hospitals, information from hospitals, from morgue contacts, from volunteers and activists. So this problem, we call it verification problem. Yes, it's powerful, but it has lack of verifications because of the communication constraints and the problem in information flow in Iran. So Iran has very, very, very special case due to those constraints. So that's why we found that big gap between the official number and the recent number, or the number by United Nations. What's happening in Iran, if you can just allow me to talk about it.
Of course.
What's happening in Iran is not organic at all, from my point of view. Let's go back a little bit to the beginning of the protest. The beginning of the protest was started in December 28th. It started actually by some shopkeepers in what they call it in Iran, Grand Bazaar, Tehran's Grand Bazaar. Those shopkeepers, they started heading to the streets, protesting because of the drop of the Iranian lira, Iranian currency, sharp drop actually, and the currency fluctuation. It might be started in a very organic way, but the escalation of the protest was not normal, especially the time of that escalation. The time came with exactly the Venezuela's operation, what happened in Venezuela in the first week of January. That's why Minister Hakan Fidan, he mentioned that in his latest interview. He said Iran will not be new Venezuela. And he refused, and definitely the Turkish government is rejecting completely any intervention from outsiders or any foreign side inside Iran. So definitely Iran will not be another Venezuela. Maybe they were thinking that by doing that intervention, this intervention will lead to regime change. This will not lead to regime change, as now how we can see nothing changed at all.
Okay.
The government started to back again the internet, but only internally for internal uses only, and even the rate of protests started to get reduced.
Okay, Doctor. First of all, thank you very much for taking us back to the origins of the protests. It's good for our viewers to be reminded and then to have a look at what's happened today and the scale that it's reached. And you have touched on some of the most important points that I also wanted to discuss with you. What does this level of violence and repression suggest about the regime's calculation in dealing with opposition?
After that number of death, which is, by the way, I have to highlight this number, let's consider the lowest number, the official number now, which is around 3,500. This is the highest number if we will check the history or the record of Iranian protest. This is the highest number. So, which is highlighting lots of things. This number is also includes, which this part I have to highlight it includes both sides, security forces and protesters as well. Here, what happened that the opposition, they found out that what's happening now, it's their chance. Especially when President Trump publicly, he said that to the people of Iran, stay in the street, the help is coming to you soon. And after that, what happened is President Trump, apparently he changed his mind for a way or for a reason or another, But he changed apparently his mind for direct attack to Iran, at least now, because as per the analysis, the timing is not suitable for America and Israel to attack Iran, direct attack now. So the opposition in Iran, they took it as the chance for, again, the main target and the main purpose for Iran, for the opposition in Iran and Israel and America is regime change. Regime change, from my point of view, in Iran, it's not at all, will not bring any benefit. This, in case this happened, regime change in Iran, this will lead to a very, very big problems, not only in Iran, in the whole region.
Doctor, let's stay on that, the foreign intervention, and you did mention how Hakan Fidan specifically mentioned that, and he said Turkey was strongly against any foreign intervention. And now just recently, Trump announced that the US has many ships heading towards Iran, a large fleet heading in the direction. He said, let's see what happens. Is this a serious sign that there could be military intervention?
It is a serious sign, definitely, because as I mentioned, they delayed the attack. Still the attack in their minds. It's just a matter of time. They delayed. This is number one. Number two, the fear of sudden attack might happen by Iran. This is another reason. So now America and Israel, they are on ready mode. Should be there from their point of view, of course. They are seriously in ready mode, because the 12 days war last year, it wasn't easy at all. This war, it was very harmful for all sides in this war. Not only sides, it was very harmful even for the region. It affected not only Iran, it didn't affect only Israel, it affected Iraq, it affected Jordan, it affected Lebanon. They shut down the operation in their airports for several days. So it wasn't easy at all. So they know the strength of Iran. They know the capacity and the capability, military capability of Iran very well. And for foreign intervention, I think, and I totally agree with Minister Hakan Fidan, when they asked him, what do you think about foreign intervention? What can you say to American people or American administration? He said that I don't recommend at all, because already Iran is very harmed by these sanctions. The Iranian economy is getting affected, extremely affected by the sanctions. That's why people are or were in the street or still in the street. This was the main reason. So the economy of Iran, due to the American or foreigner sanctions, not only American, because American and European as well, already harmed Iran so much.
Dr. Nourhan, it's been a pleasure talking to you. That's all we have time for. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
That's the news for this hour. Stay tuned to A News for more updates.